The blood on the snow had frozen to dark crystals by the time Nathaniel Crawford stumbled out of the saloon and told his daughter she was worth less than the horse that had just died in their barn. Nora Crawford stood there in the bitter December cold of 1878, her worn coat pulled tight around her thin frame, watching her father sway on his feet as whiskey-laced words cut deeper than any knife ever could. The streets of Denver, Colorado were nearly empty at this late hour, most sensible folks having retreated indoors where fires burned and families gathered. But Nora had been sent to fetch her father home for the third time that week, and now she wished she had stayed in bed. "You hear me, girl?" Nathaniel spat into the snow, his breath forming clouds that hung in the freezing air. "That mare was worth $50. What are you worth? Nothing. Not a damn thing. Your mother died bringing you into this world, and all I got was a worthless daughter who cannot even cook a decent meal or attract a husband." Nora felt the familiar sting behind her eyes, but she had learned long ago that tears only made things worse. At 22 years old, she had endured nearly a decade of her father's cruelty, ever since her mother's death when Nora was 12. The drinking had started then, slowly at first, but it had grown into a monster that consumed whatever decent man her father might have once been. She opened her mouth to respond, to say anything that might calm him down enough to walk home, but before she could speak, a deep voice cut through the frozen night. "That is no way to speak to a lady, mister." Both Nora and her father turned to see a tall figure leading a paint horse down the main street. The man wore a heavy coat dusted with snow, and even in the dim light from the saloon windows, Nora could see the strong line of his jaw and the steady, calm expression in his eyes. He looked to be in his mid-20s, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and a hat pushed back on his head despite the cold. "Mind your own business, stranger," Nathaniel growled, taking a step toward the newcomer with his fists clenched. The cowboy stopped about 10 feet away, his hand resting easy on his horse's neck. His posture was relaxed, but there was something in the way he stood that suggested he could handle himself if needed. "I would be happy to mind my own business, sir, but I cannot stand by while a man tears down someone who deserves better. I may not know this young woman, but I can see clear as day that she has more value than you are willing to recognize." Nora stared at the stranger, shocked into silence. No one in Denver ever stood up to her father. Most people knew Nathaniel Crawford as a bitter drunk and simply avoided him, leaving Nora to deal with his temper alone. The fact that this cowboy, this complete stranger, would defend her made something warm unfold in her chest despite the freezing temperature. "What did you say?" Nathaniel's voice rose dangerously, and he stumbled forward another step. "You have no right to tell me how to talk to my own daughter. She is my property, my responsibility, and if I say she is worthless, then she is worthless." The cowboy's expression hardened. "No person is another person's property, and from what I can see, this young woman has been carrying responsibility that is not hers to bear. Maybe you should sleep off that whiskey before you say things you will regret in the morning." "I will not regret a damn thing," Nathaniel snarled, but his footing was unsteady, and when he tried to lunge forward, he nearly fell face first into a snowdrift. Nora moved instinctively to catch her father's arm, years of habit taking over, but the cowboy was faster. He stepped forward and caught Nathaniel by the shoulder, steadying him with surprising gentleness given the situation. "Easy there. Let's get you somewhere you can sit down." "Get your hands off me," Nathaniel tried to shake him off, but he had no strength left. The whiskey and the cold had taken their toll, and his legs were barely holding him upright. The cowboy looked at Nora, and their eyes met for the first time. His were a deep brown, warm and concerned. "Where do you live, miss? I will help you get him home," "We are just 2 streets over," Nora heard herself say, her voice barely above a whisper. "The house with the blue door, but you do not have to do this. I can manage." "I am sure you can," the cowboy said, and there was no condescension in his tone, only respect. "But that does not mean you should have to do it alone tonight. My name is Benjamin Lancaster, and I just rode into town looking for work. Seems like helping a lady in need is a good way to start my time in Denver." Despite everything, despite the cold and her father's cruelty and the exhaustion that seemed to seep into her very bones, Nora felt the corners of her mouth lift in a small smile. Nora Crawford. "And I would appreciate the help, Mr. Lancaster." "Benjamin, please," he said, then turned his attention back to her father, who had gone mostly quiet, his anger fading into the confusion that often accompanied his drinking. "Come on, sir. Let's get you home and into a warm bed." Together, they half-carried, half-guided Nathaniel through the snowy streets of Denver. The city was quiet except for the crunch of their boots in the fresh powder and the occasional sound of music drifting from one of the still-open saloons. Benjamin's horse followed behind them without needing to be led, well-trained and patient. Nora found herself acutely aware of Benjamin's presence beside her, the way he took most of her father's weight without complaint, the way he navigated the icy patches with sure footing. When they reached the small house with the faded blue door, Nora fumbled with cold, numbed fingers to get the key from her pocket. Benjamin waited patiently, keeping Nathaniel upright, and when the door finally swung open, he helped guide her father inside and into the bedroom off the main room. Nathaniel collapsed onto the bed fully clothed, already snoring before his head hit the pillow. Nora stood in the doorway, watching her father with an expression Benjamin could not quite read. There was pain there, certainly, but also resignation and a bone-deep weariness that made her seem older than her years. He stepped back quietly, giving her space, and moved into the main room where a fireplace sat cold and dark. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the fireplace. Nora startled slightly, as if she had forgotten he was there. "Oh, yes, of course. The wood is in the box there. I should have gotten a fire going before I left, but I thought we would be back sooner." She moved to close her father's bedroom door, then stood in the center of the room, her arms wrapped around herself. Benjamin worked quickly, building a fire with the practiced ease of someone who had done it 1,000 times. Soon, flames were crackling cheerfully, throwing warm light across the modest room. The house was small but clean, with simple furniture and curtains that looked like they had been mended multiple times. There were signs everywhere of someone trying to make a home despite difficult circumstances. A vase of dried flowers on the table, a quilt draped over the back of a chair with careful stitches visible even from a distance, books stacked neatly on a shelf. "Thank you," Nora said quietly. She had moved closer to the fire, holding her hands out to the warmth. In the better light, Benjamin could see her more clearly. She had auburn hair pulled back in a braid that had come partly loose, and her face, though drawn with fatigue, had a delicate beauty to it. Her eyes were a striking green, and right now they were carefully avoiding his gaze. "You are welcome," Benjamin said. He should leave, he knew. It was improper for him to be alone with an unmarried woman in her home, even under these circumstances. But something kept him rooted to the spot, a concern that if he left, she would simply collapse under the weight of whatever burden she had been carrying. "Is it like this often? Your father, I mean." Nora's laugh was bitter and small. "Every night, sometimes twice a day, he was not always this way. When my mother was alive, he was different, kinder. But she died giving birth to what would have been my brother, and my father has blamed me for her death ever since. In his mind, if I had been a good enough daughter, she would not have wanted another child. He would not have lost her." Benjamin felt anger rise in his chest, hot and sharp. "That is not your fault. None of it is. You know that, right?" She finally looked at him, and the vulnerability in her eyes made his breath catch. "Knowing something in your head and feeling it in your heart are two different things, Benjamin. But thank you for saying it. And thank you for what you said out there in the street. No one has ever defended me like that before." "Then the people in this town are fools," Benjamin said bluntly. "I was in your presence for maybe 5 minutes before I could see that you are strong, capable, and kind. Those are not worthless qualities. They are rare and precious." A flush crept into Nora's pale cheeks, and she looked away again, but not before Benjamin caught the glimmer of tears in her eyes. "You should not say such things. You do not even know me." "I know enough," Benjamin said. He moved a step closer, then stopped himself. "Listen, I meant what I said earlier. I came to Denver looking for work. I am good with horses, decent with cattle, and I can handle most ranch work. If there is anything you need help with around here, I would be glad to do it. No payment necessary, just consider it a neighborly gesture." Nora shook her head. "I cannot ask you to do that. You have already done more than enough tonight." "You are not asking, I am offering." Benjamin smiled, and it transformed his face, making him look younger and more carefree. "Besides, I saw your barn on the way in. If you lost a horse recently, you probably have repairs that need doing before the next storm hits. Denver winters are not forgiving." She studied him for a long moment, and Benjamin got the sense that she was trying to figure out what his angle was, what he wanted from her. He kept his expression open and honest, letting her look. Finally, she sighed. "The barn door is hanging crooked, and there is a hole in the roof. I have been trying to fix it myself, but I do not have the right tools or the knowledge. If you really are offering to help, I would be grateful. But I insist on paying you somehow. I can cook, and we have some supplies." "A hot meal would be payment enough," Benjamin said. "I have been eating trail food for the past 2 weeks, and I am desperate for something that does not come from a can." The hint of a genuine smile touched Nora's lips, and Benjamin felt absurdly pleased to have put it there. "Then we have an agreement. You can start tomorrow if you like." "The barn is not getting any better with time." "Tomorrow it is," Benjamin agreed. He moved toward the door, then paused with his hand on the latch. "Will you be all right tonight? Your father—" "He will sleep until noon," Nora said with the confidence of long experience. "He is always too sick to bother me the morning after a drinking night. I will be fine." Benjamin nodded slowly. He did not like leaving her here, but he could hardly invite her to come with him, and he had no right to interfere further. "I will see you in the morning then." "Good night, Nora Crawford." "Good night, Benjamin Lancaster," she replied. "And thank you for everything." Benjamin stepped out into the cold night, pulling the door closed behind him. His horse nickered softly, and he stroked the animal's neck before swinging up into the saddle. As he rode slowly back toward the center of town where he had seen a boarding house earlier, he could not stop thinking about the young woman with green eyes and a burden too heavy for anyone to carry alone. He had come to Denver with no particular plans beyond finding work and maybe settling down somewhere for a while. Now, unexpectedly, he found he had a reason to stay. The boarding house was easy to find, and the proprietor, a middle-aged woman named Mrs. Harrington, was happy to rent him a room for a reasonable rate. She even had a small stable out back where Benjamin could keep his horse. After getting settled in and making sure his horse was properly bedded down for the night, Benjamin lay in bed staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep despite his exhaustion from the long journey. He kept seeing the look on Nora's face when her father had called her worthless, the way she had stood there in the snow taking the abuse as if she believed she deserved it. Benjamin had 5 sisters back home in Wyoming, all of them raised to know their worth, and to never let anyone diminish it. The idea that Nora had spent years being told she had no value made him furious and sad in equal measure. He barely knew her, and yet something about her had gotten under his skin in a way he could not quite explain. Maybe it was the strength he saw in her, the way she kept going despite everything. Maybe it was the glimpse he had caught of the person she might be if she were not weighed down by her father's cruelty. Or maybe it was simply that he recognized in her a kind of loneliness that matched his own. Benjamin had left Wyoming 6 months ago after his father died, leaving the family ranch to his oldest brother. There had been no animosity in the decision. It was simply the way things were done. The oldest son inherited, and the younger sons had to make their own way. Benjamin had been restless anyway, eager to see more of the world beyond the valley where he had grown up. He had worked odd jobs as he traveled, never staying in one place for more than a few weeks, always looking for something he could not quite name. Maybe, he thought as he finally drifted off to sleep, maybe he had found it in a pair of green eyes and a woman who deserved so much more than life had given her. The next morning dawned clear and bitterly cold. Benjamin woke early out of habit and made his way downstairs where Mrs. Harrington served a breakfast of eggs, bacon, and fresh bread. There were a few other boarders at the table, mostly men who worked in the mines or on the railroad, and they talked about work and weather and the upcoming Christmas holiday. Benjamin listened with half an ear while his mind kept drifting back to Nora. After breakfast, he gathered his tools from his saddlebags and headed back through town toward the little house with the blue door. In the daylight, Denver looked less bleak than it had the night before. The sun glinted off the snow, and people were out on the streets going about their business. It was a growing city, benefiting from the railroad and the mining boom, and there was a sense of energy in the air despite the cold. The Crawford house looked smaller in daylight, the paint more faded, the whole structure leaning slightly to one side as if tired of standing upright. Benjamin went around to the barn first, wanting to assess the damage before he knocked on the door. What he found was worse than he had expected. The barn door was not just hanging crooked. It was barely attached at all, one hinge completely broken and the other bent nearly in half. The hole in the roof was big enough that snow had piled inside, and there were other problems too: loose boards, a cracked support beam, and what looked like the beginnings of rot in one corner. "It is worse than I thought." Benjamin turned to see Nora standing a few feet away, wrapped in a shawl over her dress. Her hair was neatly braided today, and there were faint shadows under her eyes, but she looked more rested than she had the night before. "It needs work," Benjamin agreed. "But it is nothing that cannot be fixed. I will need to go into town to get some supplies, though. Hinges, nails, lumber for the roof. Do you have money for materials?" Nora bit her lip. "Some. My father has money from the sale of our last crop, but he spends most of it on whiskey. I have been setting aside what I can from selling eggs and doing mending work for other people. It is not much, but it should be enough for basic supplies." "Let me see what I can do," Benjamin said. "I might be able to trade work for materials. I am good at making deals." Before Nora could respond, the sound of breaking glass came from inside the house, followed by her father's voice shouting something incomprehensible. Nora's face went pale, and she turned quickly toward the house. Benjamin followed, concern prickling up his spine. They found Nathaniel Crawford in the kitchen, surrounded by broken glass and spilled liquid. He had apparently knocked over a bottle and, in trying to catch it, had swept several glasses off the counter as well. He was cursing and holding his hand, blood dripping from a cut on his palm. "Father, do not move," Nora said, her voice steady despite the fear Benjamin could see in her eyes. "You are going to cut yourself more on the glass. Stay still and let me clean this up." "It is your fault," Nathaniel snarled, but his voice lacked the venom of the night before. He sounded mostly sick and pathetic. "If you kept the kitchen cleaner, I would not have knocked things over." Nora did not respond. She simply moved around the glass with practiced care and guided her father to a chair. Benjamin watched as she cleaned and bandaged the cut with gentle efficiency, her movements swift and sure. She had done this before, he realized. Many times. Nathaniel seemed to notice Benjamin for the first time. His bloodshot eyes narrowed. "Who are you? What are you doing in my house?" "Benjamin Lancaster, sir," Benjamin said politely. "I am here to repair your barn. Your daughter hired me." "Did she now?" Nathaniel's gaze swung to Nora. "And what are you planning to pay him with? We barely have enough money to feed ourselves thanks to your uselessness around here." "I am working for food," Benjamin interjected before Nora could respond. "Your daughter has offered to cook for me in exchange for the repairs. It is a fair trade." Nathaniel grunted, and Benjamin could not tell if he approved or disapproved. "Just keep out of my way," he muttered finally, then winced and pressed a hand to his temple. "The noise from the hammering is going to split my head open." "I will try to keep it down," Benjamin said, though he had no intention of doing any such thing. Maybe the noise would discourage Nathaniel from drinking again so soon. Nora finished cleaning up the broken glass and helped her father back to his bedroom. When she returned to the kitchen, Benjamin was waiting. "I am sorry," she said quietly. "You should not have to see this, any of this." "Stop apologizing for things that are not your fault," Benjamin said, his voice gentle but firm. "You did not break the glasses and you did not cut his hand. You are just trying to hold everything together, and you are doing a remarkable job of it." Anyone else would have crumbled under this pressure long ago. Nora looked at him with an expression he could not quite read. "You really mean that, don't you? You are not just saying it to be kind." "I never say things I do not mean," Benjamin told her. "It is a flaw, according to my mother. She always said I was too blunt for polite society." That surprised a laugh out of Nora, small and genuine. "I think I would like your mother." "She would like you too," Benjamin said, and realized it was true. His mother had always had a soft spot for people who needed help, and she would have taken one look at Nora and immediately started plotting ways to improve her situation. "Now, let me go into town and see about those supplies. Will you be all right here?" "Yes," Nora said. "My father will sleep most of the day now. I have mending work to do anyway, and I should start something for dinner." She paused, then added shyly, "I hope you like stew. It is about all I can make with what we have." "Stew sounds perfect," Benjamin assured her. "I will be back as soon as I can." He headed into town with a mental list of everything he would need. Denver had several general stores and a lumber yard, and Benjamin spent the morning going from place to place, comparing prices and negotiating deals. By the time he was done, he had managed to get everything he needed for less than he had expected, partly by promising to help the lumber yard owner with a difficult horse that no one else could handle. When he returned to the Crawford property, it was past noon. Nora came out of the house when she heard the wagon he had borrowed, her face lighting up with surprise. "How did you manage all this?" "Charm and determination," Benjamin said with a grin. "Also, I promised to break a horse for the lumber yard owner. Apparently it is a mean-tempered stallion that has thrown every rider who has tried to mount it." Nora looked worried. "That sounds dangerous." "I have been working with horses since I could walk," Benjamin said. "I will be fine. Besides, it got us everything we need to fix this barn properly, and I am not about to let a horse get the better of me." Over the next several hours, Benjamin worked on the barn while Nora went in and out bringing him water and checking on his progress. He replaced the broken hinges first, then moved on to patching the hole in the roof. It was cold, hard work, and his hands were nearly numb despite his gloves, but he found a satisfaction in it that he had not felt in months. There was something deeply gratifying about taking something broken and making it whole again. As he worked, Nora told him about her life in Denver. She had been born here, had never lived anywhere else. Her mother had been a school teacher before marriage, and she had taught Nora to read and write and love books. After her mother's death, Nora had tried to keep learning on her own, reading every book she could get her hands on, dreaming of a life beyond the narrow confines of her father's house. "I wanted to be a teacher too," she confessed as she sat on an overturned bucket watching him work on the roof. "But my father would not hear of it. He said I was needed at home, that I had responsibilities here, so I stayed." "It is not too late," Benjamin said, pausing to look down at her. "You are young. You could still pursue that dream if you wanted to." Nora shook her head. "I cannot leave my father. No matter how cruel he is still my father. He would not survive without me." Benjamin wanted to argue, to tell her that she owed her father nothing after the way he had treated her, but he held his tongue. Nora had to come to that realization on her own. Pushing too hard would only make her defensive. "Well," he said instead, "maybe there is a middle ground somewhere. A way for you to have your own life while still helping him." "Maybe," Nora said, but she sounded doubtful. By late afternoon, Benjamin had finished the most critical repairs. The barn was weatherproof again, the door hung straight, and the worst of the structural damage had been addressed. There was still more work to be done, but it could wait for another day. He climbed down from the roof, his muscles aching pleasantly, and found Nora waiting with a smile. "Come inside," she said. "Dinner is ready and you must be frozen through." The house was warm and filled with the savory smell of cooking food. Nathaniel was still in his room, either sleeping or simply avoiding them, and Benjamin was grateful for his absence. Nora had set the small table with mismatched plates and cutlery, and she ladled stew into bowls with an almost nervous care. "I hope it is all right," she said. "I am not the best cook. My father is right about that much at least." Benjamin tasted the stew and found it simple but well made, the vegetables tender and the meat seasoned properly. "It is delicious," he said honestly. "Your father is wrong about a great many things, Nora. Your cooking is just one more item on that list." She smiled and ducked her head, and they ate in comfortable silence for a while. Benjamin found himself noticing little things about her: the way she held her spoon, the delicate bones of her wrists, the unconscious grace in her movements. She was beautiful, he realized, in a quiet way that had nothing to do with flash or show and everything to do with the person she was inside. "Tell me about Wyoming," Nora said suddenly. "What was it like growing up there?" So Benjamin told her about the ranch, about his parents and siblings, about wide open spaces and herds of cattle stretching to the horizon. He told her about breaking his first horse at age 8, about learning to rope and ride and read the weather in the clouds. He talked about his mother's garden and his father's quiet strength, about family dinners around a crowded table, and the sense of belonging that came from being part of something larger than yourself. Nora listened with rapt attention, her eyes distant as if she were imagining herself into the scenes he described. "It sounds wonderful," she said when he finished, "like something out of a book." "It had its hardships too," Benjamin said fairly. "Winters were brutal and we lost cattle to disease and predators. But yes, it was a good life, a good place to grow up. I miss it sometimes." "Why did you leave?" Benjamin considered the question. "Restlessness, I suppose. I felt like there had to be more out there, more to see and do. My brother was always going to inherit the ranch, and I wanted to make my own way. I thought I would travel for a while, see the country, then maybe find a place to settle down and start my own spread." "Have you found it yet? The place you want to settle?" He looked at her, at the hopeful vulnerability in her eyes, and felt something shift in his chest. "I think I might be getting close," he said softly. The moment stretched between them, fragile and charged with possibility. Then Nathaniel's voice called from the bedroom, breaking the spell. "Nora." "I need water." Nora stood immediately, the light fading from her face. "I should go. He will be angry if I make him wait." Benjamin watched her go, frustration and anger warring in his chest. He hated seeing her jump to obey her father's every demand, hated the way Nathaniel's voice could erase her happiness in an instant. But again, he knew this was not his battle to fight. Not yet. All he could do was be here, be present, and hope that eventually Nora would see that she deserved more than this. Over the next several weeks, Benjamin fell into a routine. He would work odd jobs during the day, breaking horses or helping at the lumber yard or doing repairs for various people around Denver. Then, in the late afternoons, he would come to the Crawford house and work on fixing things. There was always something that needed doing. A fence that needed mending, a door that stuck, a window that would not close properly. The house and property had been neglected for years, and Benjamin took a quiet satisfaction in undoing that neglect bit by bit. And if he was honest with himself, the work was just an excuse to spend time with Nora. They talked while he worked, long conversations about everything and nothing. She told him about the books she loved, and he promised to bring her new ones from the lending library in town. He told her about his travels, the places he had seen and the people he had met. And she listened as if he were describing distant lands instead of towns just a few hundred miles away. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, Nora began to change. She smiled more easily, laughed at his jokes, and started to express opinions she had clearly kept hidden for years. She told him once that she had never had a friend before, not a real one, and Benjamin felt both honored and heartbroken by that confession. As for Nathaniel, he remained a dark cloud over everything. Some days he ignored Benjamin entirely, too lost in his drinking to care about the stranger fixing his property. Other days he was openly hostile, making cutting remarks about Benjamin's work or his motivations. Benjamin endured it with patience, refusing to be baited into an argument. He could see that his presence bothered Nathaniel, that the older man resented having someone around who treated Nora with respect and kindness. Good, Benjamin thought. Let him be uncomfortable. Let him see what it looks like when someone values his daughter. Christmas came and went, a quiet affair. Benjamin spent Christmas Eve with Nora, helping her decorate the house with evergreen branches and making sure there was enough firewood to last through the holiday. He gave her a book he had found in a shop in town, a collection of poetry by Elizabeth Barrett Browning, and the joy on her face when she unwrapped, it was the best gift he could have asked for. "I cannot accept this," she said, but she was already holding the book close to her chest. "It is too much. It is a gift," Benjamin said. "You do not have to accept or reject it, just enjoy it." She had given him a scarf she had knitted herself, the wool soft and warm in deep blue. "I made it myself," she admitted shyly. "I am not very good at knitting, but I thought you could use something warm for the winter." Benjamin wrapped the scarf around his neck immediately, touched by the thought and care that had gone into the gift. "It is perfect. Thank you, Nora." They spent the evening reading poetry aloud by the fireplace, their voices mingling in the quiet house. Nathaniel was passed out in his room, and for once Benjamin was grateful for the man's drinking. It meant he and Nora could have this time together, peaceful and undisturbed. As winter deepened into January and then February, Benjamin realized he was falling in love. It was not a sudden realization, but a gradual one, a slow accumulation of moments that added up to something undeniable. He loved the way Nora's eyes lit up when she talked about books. He loved her quiet strength, the way she endured hardship without complaint. He loved her kindness, the way she still tried to care for her father despite everything he put her through. He loved her laugh, rare but genuine, and the way she was slowly learning to trust in her own worth. The question was what to do about it. Benjamin knew that Nora's situation was complicated. She felt bound by duty to her father, trapped by circumstances, and her own sense of obligation. Declaring his feelings might only make things harder for her, might force her to choose between the life she knew and the possibility of something more. But not saying anything was becoming increasingly difficult, especially as he caught her looking at him sometimes with an expression that made his heart race. The decision was taken out of his hands one cold February evening. Benjamin had been working on repairing the chicken coop when Nathaniel came stumbling out of the house, already drunk despite the early hour. Benjamin braced himself for the usual insults or complaints, but instead, Nathaniel fixed him with a bleary stare and said, "I know what you are doing." "I am fixing your chicken coop," Benjamin said evenly. "The wire was torn and you were losing hens to foxes." "Not that," Nathaniel waved a dismissive hand. "I know what you are doing with my daughter. Think I do not see the way you look at her, the way she looks at you. You think you can come in here and steal her away from me." Benjamin set down his tools and stood up, meeting Nathaniel's gaze directly. "I am not trying to steal anyone. I am trying to be a friend to someone who needs one. And if you see something more between us, maybe that is because we treat each other with respect and kindness, something you might consider trying." Nathaniel's face turned red. "You have no right to tell me how to treat my daughter. She is worthless, always has been, and if you are sniffing around her, it is only because you think she will be easy to take advantage of." Benjamin felt his temper, usually well controlled, begin to slip. "That is your daughter you are talking about. The woman who takes care of you, who puts up with your drinking and your cruelty without complaint. She is not worthless. She is extraordinary, and the fact that you cannot see that says everything about you and nothing about her." "How dare you?" Nathaniel snarled, taking a step forward. "Get off my property. You are not welcome here anymore." "Father, no." Nora's voice cut through the confrontation. She must have heard the raised voices and come outside. "You cannot do that. Benjamin has been helping us. He has fixed so many things around here that you refuse to deal with." "I did not ask for his help," Nathaniel shouted. "And I do not want him around my daughter anymore. He is filling your head with ideas, making you think you are better than you are." Nora's face went pale, then flushed with sudden color. "No, Father, you are wrong. Benjamin has not filled my head with anything. He has just shown me what it is like to be treated like a person instead of a burden. And if you cannot see the difference, then that is your failing, not mine." Benjamin stared at Nora, shocked and proud in equal measure. He had never heard her stand up to her father before, had never seen this steel in her spine. Nathaniel seemed equally shocked, his mouth opening and closing without sound. "I am done," Nora continued, her voice shaking but determined. "I am done apologizing for existing. I am done trying to earn your approval. You have made it clear that nothing I do will ever be good enough for you, so I am going to stop trying. Benjamin has been kinder to me in 2 months than you have been in 10 years, and if you want him gone, then I will go with him." The words hung in the frozen air. Benjamin's heart was pounding. This was not how he had wanted this to happen, not with Nathaniel as an audience and anger fueling Nora's declaration. But it was happening, and he could not bring himself to regret it. Nathaniel's face cycled through several emotions before settling on something like panic. "You cannot leave. You are all I have. Who will take care of me? You can take care of yourself," Nora said, and her voice was steadier now. You managed well enough before Mother died. The only reason you need me is because you have chosen to drown yourself in whiskey instead of dealing with your grief. But that is your choice, Father, not mine, and I am making a different choice now. She turned to Benjamin, and the look in her eyes made everything else fade away. If you will have me, I would like to leave here. I know I have no right to ask, and I have nothing to offer you, but I cannot stay here anymore. I just cannot. Benjamin closed the distance between them in 3 long strides and took her hands in his. They were cold and trembling, and he squeezed gently, trying to transfer his warmth and certainty to her. You have every right to ask, and you have everything to offer. I would be honored to have you come with me, Nora Crawford. More than honored. This is ridiculous, Nathaniel sputtered. You have known each other for barely 2 months. You cannot just run off together. Watch us, Benjamin said without looking away from Nora. Nora, are you sure about this? Truly sure. Because once we leave, things will not be easy. People will talk. Your reputation might suffer. I do not care, Nora said, and she was smiling now, tears streaming down her face. I do not care what people say. I just want a chance at a life that is mine. A life where I am not worthless. You were never worthless, Benjamin said fiercely. Not for one single moment. He became aware that Nathaniel was still ranting behind them, but the words no longer mattered. He looked at Nora, at this brave, beautiful woman who had finally found the courage to choose herself. And he knew with absolute certainty that he wanted to spend the rest of his life proving to her that she was valued and loved. We should go inside and pack your things, Benjamin said practically, though his heart was singing. We can get a room at the boarding house for tonight, and tomorrow we will figure out our next steps. Nora nodded, and together they walked past Nathaniel into the house. Her father followed, still protesting, still trying to make Nora feel guilty for leaving, but she ignored him. Benjamin watched with pride as she gathered her few belongings, her movements quick and efficient as if she were afraid she might lose her nerve if she slowed down. She did not have much. Some clothes, a few books, her mother's jewelry, and a quilt that had been a wedding gift to her parents. Everything fit into one small trunk and a carpet bag. Looking at the sum total of 22 years of life packed into so little made Benjamin's chest tight with sadness and anger. But that was the past. The future, he promised himself, would be different. Are you ready? He asked when she stood in the center of the main room, her belongings gathered. Nora looked around the house one last time, and Benjamin could see her saying goodbye to whatever good memories she had of this place. Then she straightened her shoulders and met his eyes. I am ready. They walked out together, leaving Nathaniel standing in the doorway shouting after them. Benjamin loaded Nora's things onto the wagon he had borrowed, then helped her up onto the seat. As they drove away, Nora did not look back, and Benjamin admired her for it. Looking back, he knew, would only make this harder. The boarding house caused something of a stir when they arrived. Mrs. Harrington was shocked to see Benjamin with a young woman and her belongings, and even more shocked when he explained that they needed separate rooms, but that Nora would be staying indefinitely. Benjamin could see the calculations happening behind the landlady's eyes, the questions about propriety and reputation. We will be getting married, Benjamin said firmly, making the decision in that moment even though he had not yet asked Nora properly. Soon. But in the meantime, Miss Crawford needs a safe place to stay, and I am hoping you can provide it. Mrs. Harrington looked at Nora, taking in her pale face and the shadows under her eyes, and her expression softened. I can provide it. Come in, dear. Let's get you settled. Once Nora was safely installed in a room 2 doors down from Benjamin's own, Mrs. Harrington pulled him aside. That is Nathaniel Crawford's daughter, is it not? I have heard stories about that man. The drinking, the temper. You did a good thing, getting her away from there. She got herself away, Benjamin said. I just gave her a reason to take the leap. Mrs. Harrington smiled knowingly. You are in love with her. It was not a question, but Benjamin answered anyway. Yes, madam, I am. Does she know? Not yet, not properly, but I plan to tell her soon. Good, Mrs. Harrington said. She deserves some happiness after what she has been through. Just make sure you treat her right, Benjamin Lancaster, or you will answer to me. I would not dream of doing otherwise, Benjamin said seriously. That night, Benjamin lay in bed thinking about everything that had happened. In the span of a few hours, his entire life had changed direction. He had come to Denver looking for work and purpose, and he had found something infinitely more precious, a woman worth building a life with. The question now was how to do it right, how to give Nora the security and respect she deserved while they navigated this sudden change in their circumstances. The next morning, Benjamin woke with a plan. After breakfast, he asked Nora to take a walk with him, and she agreed, bundling up against the cold. They walked through Denver's streets in the crisp morning air, their breath forming clouds, and Benjamin led her to a small church at the edge of town. What are we doing here? Nora asked, confused. I wanted to ask you something in a proper place, Benjamin said. He took both her hands, just as he had the night before, and looked into her eyes. Nora Crawford, I know we have not known each other long. I know that by the standards of the world this is happening too fast. But I also know that I love you. I love your strength and your kindness and your brilliant mind. I love the way you read poetry and the way you care for wounded things. I love that you finally found the courage to choose yourself, and I want to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret that choice. Nora's eyes were wide, her lips parted in surprise. Benjamin, I am asking you to marry me, Benjamin continued. Not because it is the proper thing to do, though it is. Not because people will talk if we do not, though they will. I am asking because I want to be your husband. I want to be the person who stands beside you as you discover who you are outside of your father's shadow. I want to build a life with you, a home with you. So what do you say, Nora? Will you marry me? Tears were streaming down Nora's face, but she was smiling. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Benjamin, I will marry you. He kissed her then, gentle and reverent, and it felt like a promise. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Nora laughed. I cannot believe this is happening. 2 days ago, I thought I would spend the rest of my life trapped in that house. And now I am standing here, engaged to be married to the most wonderful man I have ever met. It feels like a dream. It is real, Benjamin assured her. I promise you this is real. They went inside the church and found the minister, a kind-faced older man named Reverend Thomas. When Benjamin explained their situation, the Reverend listened carefully, then asked to speak to Nora alone. Benjamin waited outside, nervous but trusting that Nora could handle whatever questions the Reverend might have. When they emerged 20 minutes later, Nora's eyes were red from crying, but she looked lighter somehow, as if a weight had been lifted. Reverend Thomas smiled and shook Benjamin's hand. She loves you. That much is clear, and from what she has told me, you have been a blessing in her life. I would be happy to marry you both. How soon were you thinking? As soon as possible, Benjamin said. I know that might seem hasty, but I want Nora to have the protection of my name and the security of marriage. I do not want there to be any question about her respectability or my intentions. Admirable, Reverend Thomas said. I can marry you in 3 days on Saturday. That will give you time to get a license and make any necessary arrangements. Does that work for you both? Nora looked at Benjamin, and he saw hope and fear and love all tangled together in her expression. He squeezed her hand. That works perfectly. The next 3 days passed in a flurry of activity. Benjamin got the marriage license from the courthouse, making it all official and legal. He also went to speak with the owner of the lumber yard, the man whose difficult horse he had promised to break. To Benjamin's relief, the man agreed to give him steady work starting after the wedding, with wages good enough to support a wife and eventually a family. Nora spent the time settling into the boarding house and preparing for the wedding. Mrs. Harrington, who had warmed to the situation considerably, helped her alter one of her dresses to serve as a wedding gown. It was a simple gray wool dress, but with some clever stitching and a bit of lace salvaged from another garment, it became something special. On Friday evening, the night before the wedding, Nora found Benjamin in the boarding house parlor. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice serious. Benjamin immediately set aside the newspaper he had been reading. "What is it? Are you having second thoughts?" "No," Nora said quickly. "No, nothing like that. I just want to make sure you know what you are getting into. Benjamin, I have no money, no dowry. My father certainly is not going to give me anything, and I have no skills beyond basic cooking and cleaning. I cannot help you build a business or contribute much to our finances. I am not a very good deal as far as wives go." Benjamin stood up and went to her, framing her face with his hands. "Nora Crawford, you need to stop listening to your father's voice in your head. You are not a deal. You are not a transaction. You are the woman I love, and everything you are is more than enough. I do not care about dowries or business skills. I care about you, about who you are as a person. And in case you have not noticed, you are intelligent, resourceful, and braver than you give yourself credit for. Those qualities are worth more than any amount of money." She leaned into his touch, her eyes closing briefly. "You really believe that?" "I really do. And someday, hopefully soon, you will believe it too." The wedding day dawned clear and cold, with fresh snow sparkling on the ground. Benjamin dressed in his best clothes, which were not fancy but were clean and well kept, and made his way to the church early. A few people from the boarding house had agreed to come as witnesses, including Mrs. Harrington and 2 other boarders. When Nora arrived on Mrs. Harrington's arm, Benjamin forgot how to breathe. She looked beautiful in her altered dress, her hair swept up and pinned with some flowers Mrs. Harrington had managed to find despite the winter season. But it was not just her appearance that struck him. It was the way she carried herself, with a quiet confidence he had not seen before. She was choosing this, choosing him, choosing a new life, and that choice made her radiant. The ceremony was simple and short. They spoke their vows in clear, steady voices, and when Reverend Thomas pronounced them husband and wife, Benjamin felt something fundamental shift in his soul. This woman was his now, and he was hers, and he would spend every day of the rest of his life making sure she never regretted trusting him with her heart. He kissed her as the small group of witnesses applauded, and Nora kissed him back with a passion that surprised and delighted him. When they broke apart, both were smiling. Mrs. Harrington had arranged a small celebration back at the boarding house, with cake and tea and congratulations all around. It was nothing fancy, but to Benjamin it felt perfect. This was what mattered. Good people coming together to celebrate something worth celebrating. As the evening wore on and the other guests drifted away, Benjamin and Nora found themselves alone in the parlor. The fire was burning low, casting flickering shadows on the walls. Nora sat close to Benjamin on the small sofa, and he had his arm around her shoulders. "What happens now?" Nora asked softly. "Now we start our life together," Benjamin said. "I start work at the lumber yard on Monday. We will save up enough money to rent a small house of our own. Nothing fancy at first, but something that is ours, and we will figure out the rest as we go." "I want to find work too," Nora said. "I know it is not traditional for wives to work, but I want to contribute. Maybe I could do mending or laundry for people. Or maybe I could see if anyone needs help with their children. I like children. We could have children of our own someday, Benjamin said, the thought filling him with warmth. If you want them. Nora's smile was soft and wondering. I would like that. I always wanted siblings, wanted to be part of a big family. My father made that impossible, but maybe we could create it for ourselves. We can create whatever we want, Benjamin said. That is the beauty of starting fresh. We can decide together what our life will look like. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, and Benjamin marveled at how natural this felt, how right. Just 2 months ago, he had been a stranger riding into Denver with no particular plans. Now he was a husband with a purpose and a future. Life, he reflected, had a funny way of working out. Over the next several months, Benjamin and Nora settled into married life with surprising ease. Benjamin's work at the lumber yard proved steady and reliable, and he quickly gained a reputation for being dependable and skilled. His abilities with difficult horses became known throughout Denver, and people started seeking him out specifically for training work, which meant extra income. Nora found work doing mending and alterations for a dressmaker in town. It turned out she had a natural talent for sewing that had never been fully developed under her father's roof. The dressmaker, a woman named Mrs. Chen, was impressed with Nora's neat stitches and her eye for detail. Within a few weeks, Nora was working regular hours at the dress shop, contributing a significant amount to their savings. By summer, they had saved enough to rent a small house on the outskirts of Denver. It had 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, a parlor, and a small barn that Benjamin immediately claimed for his horse training work. The house needed repairs, but Benjamin was good at that, and Nora had developed an eye for making spaces beautiful despite limited resources. Together, they transformed the shabby little house into a home. Nora bloomed in this new environment. Away from her father's constant criticism, she began to discover who she was and what she was capable of. She joined a women's reading circle at the church, making friends for the first time in her life. She experimented with cooking and baking, getting better with each attempt. She planted a small garden behind the house, coaxing vegetables from the Colorado soil. But the biggest change was in the way she saw herself. Benjamin made sure to tell her daily how much he valued her, how much he appreciated everything she did. He praised her sewing, her cooking, her garden, her intelligence. He sought her opinion on decisions and listened when she gave it. Slowly, painfully, the voice of her father in her head began to fade, replaced by a new internal voice that was kinder and more truthful. One evening in late July, as they sat on their small porch watching the sunset, Nora turned to Benjamin. "I am happy," she said, and there was wonder in her voice. "I do not think I have ever said those words before and truly meant them, but I am happy, Benjamin. You have given me the most precious gift imaginable." "What gift is that?" Benjamin asked, though he thought he knew. "You have shown me that I deserve to be happy, that I deserve to be loved and valued. You have given me myself." Benjamin pulled her close, his heart full. "You always deserved those things, Nora. I just helped you see it." They sat together as the sky turned pink and gold, and Benjamin thought about how far they had come. From that snowy night in December to this warm summer evening, their lives had been transformed in ways he could never have predicted. And the best part was that this was just the beginning. They had years ahead of them, a lifetime to build together. As fall approached, Nora began to suspect she might be pregnant. She waited to be sure before telling Benjamin, going to see a doctor who confirmed what she had already guessed. When she finally told Benjamin one evening after dinner, his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. "A baby," he repeated, his face lighting up with joy. Nora, that is wonderful. How do you feel? Are you all right? What do you need? Nora laughed at his sudden protectiveness. I am fine. A little tired, and I have been sick in the mornings, but the doctor says that is normal. The baby should come in early spring. Benjamin pulled her into his arms, careful and gentle. We are going to be parents, he said in wonder. You are going to be a mother. And you are going to be a father, Nora said. A wonderful father. Our child is going to be so loved. Over the next several months, they prepared for the baby's arrival. Benjamin built a cradle with his own hands, sanding the wood until it was smooth as silk. Nora sewed tiny clothes and blankets, her needle flying as she worked. They painted the second bedroom a cheerful yellow and moved their few pieces of spare furniture into it. The pregnancy was mostly easy, though Nora tired quickly and had to reduce her hours at the dress shop. Benjamin took on extra work to make up for the lost income, but he never complained. He seemed to delight in taking care of Nora, bringing her tea in bed, rubbing her aching feet, reading to her in the evenings. In March of 1880, as snow still lingered on the ground, Nora went into labor. It was long and difficult, and Benjamin wore a path in the kitchen floor with his pacing while the midwife attended to his wife. When he finally heard the baby's cry, he nearly collapsed with relief. The midwife emerged from the bedroom with a smile. You have a son. And your wife is tired but healthy. You can go in and meet him. Benjamin entered the bedroom to find Nora propped up on pillows, her hair damp with sweat, looking exhausted but radiantly happy. In her arms was a small bundle, and when Benjamin approached, she pulled back the blanket to reveal a tiny red face, eyes squeezed shut, mouth open in a wail. Our son, Nora said softly. Benjamin, look at him. He is perfect. Benjamin sat on the edge of the bed and looked down at the baby, feeling his heart expand in ways he had not known were possible. He is perfect, he agreed. His voice was rough with emotion. What should we name him? I was thinking Thomas, after the reverend who married us, Nora said. Thomas Lancaster. What do you think? I think it is a fine name, Benjamin said. Thomas it is. Little Thomas Lancaster turned out to be a healthy, loud baby with a healthy appetite and a strong will. The first few months were exhausting, with sleepless nights and constant demands, but Benjamin and Nora navigated it together, supporting each other through the challenges. Benjamin proved to be a natural father, patient and gentle with his son, unafraid of diaper changes or midnight feedings. As Thomas grew, the house filled with the sounds of childhood, laughter, babbling, the occasional crying fit. Nora had never been happier. Every day she marveled at the life she had built, so different from the one she had resigned herself to under her father's roof. They saw Nathaniel occasionally in town, always from a distance. He had aged poorly in the 2 years since Nora left, looking older and more haggard. Nora felt pity for him but no guilt. She had made the right choice in leaving, and nothing she saw convinced her otherwise. One day, when Thomas was about 6 months old, Nathaniel approached them on the street. Benjamin immediately stepped in front of Nora and the baby, protective, but Nathaniel raised his hands. I am not here to cause trouble, he said, and his voice was hoarse and tired. I just wanted to see my grandson. Nora exchanged a glance with Benjamin, then stepped around him so her father could see the baby in her arms. This is Thomas, she said quietly. Nathaniel looked at the baby for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then his eyes lifted to Nora's face. You look happy, he said, and there was something in his voice that might have been regret. Happier than I ever saw you when you lived with me. I am happy, Nora said simply. Nathaniel nodded slowly. I was wrong about you, about everything. You were never worthless. I was just too drunk and too angry to see it, but I see it now. I see that you have made a good life for yourself, and I am glad for it. even if I had nothing to do with it. It was as close to an apology as Nathaniel would likely ever come, and Nora could see the effort it cost him. "Thank you," she said. "That means something, Father, it really does." "I do not expect you to forgive me," Nathaniel continued. "I do not deserve it, but I wanted you to know that I am sorry for all of it. You deserved better than I gave you." Nora felt tears prick her eyes. This was what she had wanted for so long, some acknowledgement from her father that she had value. Now that she had it, she realized she did not need it anymore. Benjamin had shown her value. She had shown herself her own value, but it still felt good to hear. "I do forgive you," she said, and meant it. "I cannot forget everything that happened, but I can forgive, and I hope that you can find some peace, Father. I really do." Nathaniel's eyes were wet when he nodded. He looked at Thomas one more time, then at Benjamin. "You take care of them," he said roughly. "With my life," Benjamin promised. Nathaniel walked away then, and Nora watched him go with a complex mixture of emotions. Benjamin put his arm around her shoulders. "Are you all right?" "I am," Nora said. "It feels like closure somehow. Like the last piece of the past has been put in its proper place." "Good," Benjamin said, "because our future is waiting and it is going to be wonderful." He was right. The years that followed were full and rich. Benjamin's reputation grew, and eventually he was able to buy a larger property outside Denver where he could train horses properly. The business thrived, with people coming from all over Colorado to have Benjamin work with their animals. Nora continued her work with Mrs. Chen, becoming a full partner in the dress shop as her skills and reputation grew. She became known for her beautiful, precise work, and soon women throughout Denver were requesting her specifically for their most important garments. They had 2 more children, a daughter named Lily 2 years after Thomas, and another son named James 2 years after that. The house was always full of noise and activity, and Benjamin and Nora loved every minute of it. They raised their children with love and respect, making sure each one knew they were valued and cherished. On their 10th anniversary, Benjamin took Nora back to the church where they had been married. They stood in the same spot where he had proposed, and he took her hands just as he had that day. "10 years ago, I asked you to marry me," Benjamin said. "I told you I loved you, and I promised to spend my life making sure you never regretted choosing me." "I have never regretted it," Nora said. "Not for one single moment." "I am glad," Benjamin said. "Because I want to renew that promise today. I love you even more now than I did then, if that is possible. You are my partner, my best friend, the mother of my children, and the love of my life. Thank you for taking a chance on a passing cowboy who saw your value clear." Nora laughed through her tears. "Thank you for seeing it when I could not see it myself. Thank you for being patient while I learned to believe I was worth loving. You saved me, Benjamin." "We saved each other," Benjamin said. He kissed her softly, and it felt like coming home. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new joys and challenges. Thomas grew into a serious, thoughtful young man who inherited his father's way with horses. Lily was bright and creative, with her mother's talent for sewing and a sharp business mind that promised future success. James was the wild one, always getting into trouble, but with a huge heart and fierce loyalty to his family. Benjamin and Nora watched their children grow with pride and wonder. They built a life that was everything they had dreamed of and more. A successful business, a loving family, a home filled with laughter and warmth. They never forgot where they had started, those early days when everything was uncertain and difficult. Those memories made them appreciate what they had built all the more. Nora stayed in touch with Mrs. Harrington and Reverend Thomas, never forgetting the kindness they had shown when she needed it most. She became active in the church, helping other young women who found themselves in difficult situations. offering support and resources that had not been available to her. Benjamin remained close with his family in Wyoming, making the trip back several times over the years with Nora and the children. His mother adored Nora, just as he had known she would, and his sisters welcomed her into the family with open arms. The Lancaster clan grew and expanded, with marriages and babies and all the beautiful chaos that comes with a large, loving family. As Nora approached her 40th birthday, she sometimes thought back to that snowy December night when she was 22, standing in the street while her father called her worthless. That version of herself seemed like a stranger now, someone small and defeated who could not imagine a future beyond the walls of her father's house. She wished she could go back and tell that young woman that everything would be all right, that a cowboy would see her value clear and help her see it too, that she would build a life more beautiful than anything she could imagine. But she could not go back, and maybe that was all right. Maybe that struggle, that pain, had been necessary to make her who she was now, strong, confident, loved and loving. She had learned that worth was not something someone else could give or take away. It was intrinsic, fundamental, always there waiting to be recognized. Nathaniel died when Nora was 35, his body finally giving out after years of abuse from alcohol. Nora went to his funeral and mourned not the man he had been at the end, but the father he might have been if grief and anger had not consumed him. She forgave him fully and finally, releasing the last hold he had on her heart. On a spring evening when Nora was 45 and Benjamin was 48, they sat together on the porch of their home watching the sunset. Their children were grown now, Thomas married and running his own horse training operation, Lily engaged to be married to a good man who appreciated her business sense, James away at school but coming home for the summer soon. "We did well," Benjamin said, taking Nora's hand. "Look at everything we built." "We did," Nora agreed. She looked at their land, the house they had expanded over the years, the barn where Benjamin still trained horses, the garden that had grown from a small plot to extensive beds bursting with vegetables and flowers. "I could never have imagined this back when I was living with my father. I thought I would spend my whole life in that house, taking care of him, never knowing what it felt like to be valued." "But you did know," Benjamin said. "You always had value, Nora. I just helped you see it." "You did more than that," Nora said. "You gave me a chance at a different life. You loved me when I did not know how to love myself. You were patient while I learned. You built this life with me, every step of the way." Benjamin raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "Best decision I ever made, stopping in Denver that winter. Best moment of my life, seeing you standing there in the snow and knowing I could not just walk away. Best moment of my life, hearing you tell my father you could see my value clear," Nora said. "No one had ever defended me before. No one had ever suggested I was worth defending. It changed everything." They sat together as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink and purple. Around them, their land was peaceful and prosperous, a testament to years of hard work and love. Inside the house, photographs lined the walls, their children at various ages, family gatherings, celebrations, and ordinary moments captured and preserved. "You think we will have grandchildren soon?" Nora asked. "Thomas and Sarah have been married for 2 years now." "I suspect we will," Benjamin said with a smile. "And when we do, we will spoil them absolutely rotten." "We will teach them that they have value," Nora said. "That they are loved and worthy exactly as they are. That is the most important thing we can give them." "That and cookies," Benjamin said, making Nora laugh. "You cannot underestimate the power of grandparents with cookies." They talked until the stars came out, making plans and remembering the past, and simply enjoying each other's company. After 27 years of marriage, they still had plenty to say to each other, still found joy in the simple act of being together. Later that week, Thomas and Sarah came for dinner with exciting news. They were expecting a baby in the fall. Nora cried with happiness, and Benjamin shook his son's hand with pride. The cycle was continuing, a new generation beginning, and it filled them both with hope and joy. When Thomas's son was born in October, they named him Benjamin after his grandfather. Nora held the baby and thought about how far they had all come. How much had changed since that cold winter night when she met Benjamin Lancaster for the first time. That chance encounter had set everything in motion, had created this entire life full of love and family and belonging. "What are you thinking about?" Benjamin asked, coming to stand beside her as she held their grandson. "I am thinking about fate," Nora said. "About how lucky we were that you came to Denver exactly when you did. About how different my life would have been if you had not stopped that night, if you had not defended me." "I do not think it was luck," Benjamin said thoughtfully. "I think it was meant to be. The universe knew we needed each other, so it made sure our paths crossed." "Maybe," Nora said. She looked down at the baby in her arms, at his tiny, perfect features, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. "Whatever it was, I am grateful, so grateful for all of it. The struggles, the triumphs, everything that brought us here." "Me too," Benjamin said. He put his arm around her shoulders, and they stood together looking at their grandson, the newest member of the family they had built. "Me too, Nora. Every single day." As the years continued to flow by, Benjamin and Nora grew older together with grace and contentment. They watched their grandchildren grow, welcomed new additions to the family, and continued to work in the ways they loved. Benjamin trained horses well into his 60s, only finally retiring when his knees complained too loudly. Nora continued her work at the dress shop until Mrs. Chen retired and sold the business to her, at which point Nora ran it for several more years before passing it on to Lily. They took up new hobbies together. Benjamin learned to carve wood, creating beautiful pieces that they displayed in their home or gave as gifts. Nora returned to her first love of reading, devouring books at a rate that amazed their children. They traveled some, taking trips to visit family or see new places, but they always came home to their property outside Denver, to the home they had built together. On their 50th wedding anniversary, their entire family gathered for a celebration. All 3 children were there with their spouses and children, Thomas with his 3 kids, Lily with her 4, and James with his 2. The house was packed full of people and noise and love, exactly as Benjamin and Nora had always wanted it to be. That evening, after most of the guests had left and only the immediate family remained, Thomas stood up and raised his glass. "I want to make a toast," he said. "To my parents, who have shown us all what love looks like. Mom, you taught us that worth comes from within, that resilience is a strength, and that kindness matters. Dad, you taught us that actions speak louder than words, that protecting the people you love is the highest calling, and that hard work builds character. Together, you built a family that is strong and loving, and we are all blessed to be part of it. To 50 more years." "Hear, hear," everyone echoed, raising their glasses. Nora looked around at all the faces, at the family that had grown from just her and Benjamin to this huge, noisy, beautiful clan, and felt her heart might burst with happiness. She caught Benjamin's eye across the room, and the look he gave her was full of love and pride and contentment. Later, when everyone had gone to bed and the house was finally quiet, Benjamin and Nora sat together in the parlor. The fire was burning low, casting dancing shadows, and they were curled up together on the sofa just as they had been 50 years earlier on their wedding night. 50 years, Nora said wonderingly. Half a century. It seems impossible. Best 50 years of my life, Benjamin said. I meant what I said in my vows, Nora. You were worth every bit of work, every challenge, every moment. Loving you has been the greatest privilege of my life. Loving you has saved me, Nora said simply. You saw value in me when I could not see it in myself. You gave me a chance to become who I was meant to be. Every good thing in my life stems from that moment when you stopped and defended me in the snow. We were meant to find each other, Benjamin said. I believe that with everything in me. You needed someone who could see your worth, and I needed someone who could show me what truly matters. We fit together, Nora. We always have. She kissed him, and it was sweet and familiar and full of 50 years of love and history. When they broke apart, they stayed close, foreheads touching, breathing the same air. I love you, Nora whispered. I love you too, Benjamin replied. Always have, always will. They sat together until the fire burned down to embers. Two people who had found each other against the odds and built something beautiful. Outside, snow began to fall, soft and gentle, covering the world in white. It reminded Nora of that first night, standing in the cold while her father's words cut deep. But now, wrapped in Benjamin's arms in the warm house they had built together, surrounded by evidence of the life and love they had created, those old wounds felt healed at last. She was not worthless. She never had been. And thanks to a cowboy who saw her value clear and had the courage to say so, she had spent 50 years proving it, to herself and to the world. That was a gift beyond measure, and she would treasure it for whatever time remained. As they finally made their way to bed, Nora took one last look around the parlor, at the photographs on the walls and the toys scattered where grandchildren had been playing, and the comfortable, well-worn furniture that had supported countless family gatherings. This was home. This was love. This was the life she had built, one choice at a time, starting with the choice to believe Benjamin when he said she had value. It had been the right choice, the best choice, and she had never, not for one single day, regretted it. Benjamin and Nora lived many more years together, growing old with grace and dignity. They were blessed to see their grandchildren grow up and start families of their own, adding yet another generation to the Lancaster legacy. Through it all, their love remained constant, a steady flame that warmed everyone around them. When Benjamin passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 85, Nora mourned him deeply, but without regret. They had been given 60 wonderful years together, a lifetime of love and partnership that most people could only dream of. She took comfort in her children and grandchildren, in the business and property they had built, in the countless lives they had touched. Nora lived another 7 years after Benjamin's death, remaining sharp and engaged until the very end. She spent her time with family, continued her reading, and wrote down the story of her life so that future generations would know where they came from and what it had taken to build the Lancaster family legacy. When she died at 91, surrounded by her children in the same house where she and Benjamin had raised their family, her last words were a whisper. I see you, Benjamin. I am coming home. Her funeral was attended by hundreds of people whose lives she had touched over the years. Thomas gave the eulogy, telling the story of how his parents had met, of his father's courage in defending a stranger and his mother's courage in choosing a new life. He talked about the lessons they had taught, the love they had shared, the family they had built from nothing but faith and hard work, and an unshakable belief in each other. My mother spent the first 22 years of her life being told she was worthless, Thomas said, his voice carrying across the crowded church. But then she met a man who saw her value clear, who helped her see it in herself. Together, they built a life that was extraordinary not because of wealth or fame, but because of love. They showed us all that worth is not something someone else can give or take away. It is intrinsic. It is fundamental. And when you find someone who sees it and reflects it back to you, you hold on to them with everything you have. My parents did that. They held onto each other through every challenge, every triumph, every ordinary moment. And because they did, all of us are here. All of us exist because of the love they shared. That is their legacy. That is what they gave us. Thomas's words rang true for everyone present. The Lancaster family had become a cornerstone of the Denver community, known for their integrity, their generosity, and their unshakable love for one another. All of it traced back to that snowy night in 1878, when Benjamin Lancaster saw a young woman being mistreated and decided to do something about it. Nora was buried beside Benjamin on their property, under a tall cottonwood tree they had planted together 40 years earlier. The headstone was simple, bearing their names and the dates of their lives, but at the bottom was an inscription that Thomas had chosen. Her father called her worthless in the snow. A passing cowboy said, "I see your value clear." Together they built a love that lasted forever. The property stayed in the family, passed down through the generations, each one adding to the legacy that Benjamin and Nora had started. The house was expanded and updated, but the core structure remained, a testament to the foundation they had built. The dress shop that Nora had partnered in eventually became a boutique run by Lily's daughter, keeping Nora's love of beautiful, well-made garments alive for a new generation. Years later, when Thomas's own grandchildren asked him about his parents, he told them the story with pride and emotion. He told them about the courage it took for Nora to leave her father's house, about Benjamin's steady love and support, about the family they had built from nothing. He made sure they understood that they came from strong stock, from people who had faced hardship and chosen love, who had been told they were worthless and proved otherwise through their actions. The story of Benjamin and Nora Lancaster became a family legend, told and retold with each generation, a reminder of where they came from and what mattered most. It was a story about seeing worth where others saw none, about having the courage to choose a different path, about building something beautiful from the ashes of pain and loss. But most of all, it was a love story. A story about two people who found each other at exactly the right moment, who saw the best in each other and helped bring it forth, who built a life together that was everything they had dreamed of and more. It was proof that love, real love, could transform everything. That one person believing in you could change the entire trajectory of your life. On the property outside Denver, the cottonwood tree grew tall and strong, shading the graves of Benjamin and Nora Lancaster. In spring, it would leaf out in brilliant green, and in fall the leaves would turn golden, falling to cover the ground in a carpet of color. Birds nested in its branches, and grandchildren played in its shade, and life went on, generation after generation. All of it made possible by a cowboy who saw a woman's value clear, and a woman who finally learned to see it in herself. Their love had lasted forever, just as the inscription promised. Not just in their lifetimes, but in the family they had built, in the lessons they had taught, in the example they had set. Every Lancaster child grew up knowing the story, knowing that worth was intrinsic, that love was transformative, that courage could change everything. And sometimes, on cold winter nights when snow fell soft and gentle over the property, people swore they could feel the presence of Benjamin and Nora, still watching over the family they had built, still loving each other across the veil of death. It was a comforting thought, a reminder that some loves really do last forever. Some bonds cannot be broken by anything as small as mortality. The Lancaster legacy lived on, strong and true, a testament to two people who took a chance on each other and built something extraordinary. It all started with a simple truth spoken on a snowy night. "I see your value clear." Those 6 words changed everything, set in motion a love story for the ages, created a family that would thrive for generations. Benjamin and Nora Lancaster had lived and loved and left behind something beautiful. And in the end, that was all anyone could hope for. Their story was complete, their love fulfilled, their legacy secure. They had taken the broken pieces of Nora's early life and used them to build something whole and healthy and good. They had proven that redemption was possible, that transformation was real, that love could heal even the deepest wounds. It was a story worth telling, a love worth celebrating, a life worth living. And for all the Lancasters who came after, it was a foundation worth building on, a legacy worth honoring, and a reminder that seeing value in others and yourself was perhaps the greatest gift of all.